So one of the species I'm really interested in, I'm considering working with, is called the marbled crayfish. It's like a regular crayfish, but it is an all-female species that clones itself. Okay, so for me, I think of things as not necessarily separate. So I started out as a biology major, and I knew I wanted to study animals. I just liked animals. I grew up with animals. I grew up in the woods finding animals in the wild. And then I found out, oh, you can study animals in psychology too. It's just now it's animal behavior. And then I found in psychology you have behavior analysis, which gives you actually really good tools to study animal behavior across species, including humans. And then from then on, it's like all the same to me. So yeah, I have degrees in bio and psych. I took a lot of graduate courses in both of them. My research is sort of interdisciplinary. I publish in both journals. I have a lot of friends that study animal behavior from the biology side. And so I guess my recommendation for like anybody is find a thing you're interested in and find another way to study it too, because you'll learn some more stuff. You'll get a broad background. The bio side of me helps me remember why animals are different. You know, like how they've evolved to be different, what their niches are, what their physiology is like, and sort of the behaviorist and psych side of me reminds me that we can study behavior, but not just have to study just instincts. Like animals are actually learning things, they're doing things. The environment they live in is dynamic. They have to go learn how to navigate the environment, learn where food is, learn how to avoid predators. I think before we start really thinking about that, sometimes we'll assume that animals are just very reflexive. And especially like some of the bugs that I work with, no, like the roaches and the bees and stuff, they're out there learning the environment. Each sort of perspective informs me a little bit and helps me, I think, get a clearer picture of what behavior is. So I started out wanting to study reptiles and amphibians, but when I started looking at graduate programs, it's challenging sometimes to find the thing that you want, and it took me a little bit to realize that no, I'm actually okay with any behavior. At first I was thinking, no, it has to be behavior of frogs, or no, it has to be the behavior of these birds at zoos. And then as I studied behavior more, which is actually what I did when I got my master's here at UNT, I'm like, no, actually just behavior is really cool. Behavior of anything is really exciting. Learning of anything is really exciting. And then I got my PhD with Charles Abramson at Oklahoma State University, and he works mostly with bees. And I didn't expect I was going to work with bees, but I worked with bees for several years. They can be really smart in some ways, and they can be kind of dumb in some other ways. Like their brain is the size of nothing. They're not really designed to learn a whole lot of stuff, but they do have to learn about their environment, but they can't fit everything in there. So tasks related to them foraging and like going to find flowers and get food and bring it back, they're really good at that. But there's some challenges working with bees. You have to have an outside like field for them. Honeybees you can't bring inside a laboratory. Bumblebees you can. I've had bumblebees too. Honeybees will get into stuff. They'll get into pesticides. We had a colony that we were getting ready to do research, and the whole colony flew away. And so when I took my first job at Converse University, I was thinking, okay, I don't want to have a field of bees. I just don't want to have to manage that, and I want something that's in a laboratory, so more like a control laboratory animal, like you might have in a rat lab, which is really common for both behavioral and biological sciences. I tried bumblebees. You can have bumblebees in a lab. There's some challenges there too. They were kind of fun. But then I got the idea of like, what's the closest version to a bug rat? And it's the cockroach. And so I started doing research on cockroaches. There's something like 6,000 species of cockroaches. Only less than 1% are pests. And the trick is just don't work with the pests. So I have a bunch of bugs in the back. I don't have any of the pest species. The species I have can't fly, they can't climb, they dig, they thrive in a captive environment, but they're tropical, so if they get out, they can't survive here. And so I just found a species that worked really nicely for the niche that I had, which was a laboratory niche. I want to have a controlled animal that I can breed year round. They're cheap, they're so low maintenance. The bees, if you have them in captivity, if you try to have bumblebees inside, they are very creative at finding ways to kill themselves. It was every day we would find like a new thing. We found one day, like the bees, we came in and there were a bunch of like dead white bumblebees. And so it turns out they'd gone over to their sugar water bowl, and I guess they'd fanned all the water out of it they'd evaporate the water out of it, started to turn it into honey, made it really thick into a glaze, but then they slipped and fell in it and they died. They glazed themselves to death. The bees were like that all the time. The roaches are like, if I go away for a conference, I just throw an apple in there and they're good. I'm not worried about it. So I found a really practical species, and I like all species. Like I love studying animal behavior, but as a career, my job is to do research. My job is to give students opportunities to do research. I need something reliable. I need something practical. And the cockroaches ended up being that. And we started doing research with them, and they actually ended up working really well. We tried to sort of copy some of the bee procedures. So bees are like the gold standard of insect learning research. And the cockroaches do pretty well too. It's really cool to see something. Again, we're talking about bugs that people think, oh, it's just, ew, gross. But now they learn stuff. And it's really cool to be able to train a roach. Earlier this semester, I had some grad students in here that were like trying a roach training procedure. And so the procedure we're doing is we're just giving the roaches a little bit of odor on a stick, and then we give them a little bit of food. And they really like dog food, so we grind up some dog food and mix that with water, add a little sugar to it. So we've got dog food sugar water. They go nuts over it. And at first you're giving them the odor and they sort of smell, they may run away, they don't really react, but then you give them food after that. And you do that 5 or 6 times, and then when you put the odor in, they're gonna run right over to it. So they've learned that odor predicts food. If you've heard of like Pavlov's dogs, this is Pavlov's roach. There is a study that actually studied salivation in roaches in response to this sort of thing. But it's really cool to see that stuff. So I think anytime you get to work with animals, you get to learn more about them. And we still have a lot we're learning about the cockroaches and the other animals we're working with. But I think that's what's always exciting, is getting to see behavior change and also be like, I did that, I made that happen. Lately, I'm also looking at like freshwater crustaceans, like some of these shrimp or crayfish, because now it's an aquatic, cockroach essentially. And I might have, again, new cool things I can find. These guys I just got into, and I got into them this last couple years because I do know that people are a little squeamish about cockroaches at least at first. So I wanted some things that were a little more accessible for people, had a little less of that creepy factor. And yeah, freshwater crustaceans like shrimp, crayfish, I think are a really good fit. And so I got them to sort of diversify the type of animals I have, because I am interested in species differences in learning. Like we've done studies comparing things like bees to horses. There are differences. The shrimp I have are blue claw prawn. I got them from some of my biology friends. And I have just a random crayfish I got from the pet store. And they're really interesting. And so one of the really simple types of experiments we can do with them is habituation. So presenting a stimulus over and over and over again and seeing if the response to that decreases. And there's a lot of caveats and details about that I'm not going to go into. But a really simple way you can do that is to show them something that startles them. And so for the roaches, they don't like it when you turn the lights on or off. It's not about lights on or off, it's about the change. And so if you change the lighting, they get startled, they run away. They will get used to that over time. But these guys, I think, are a little more visual. And so I have, I built a little experiment inside a video game, essentially. And where I have a computer screen up here, and I have just this white background, and I have a little dot that'll appear next to them. It'll start out really small, and then it gets really big. Like it's something like, sort of like coming towards them. And it startles them, but I can see they get used to it after a little bit. So one of the species I'm really interested in, I'm considering working with, is called the marbled crayfish. It's like a regular crayfish, but it is an all-female species that clones itself. Each female just lays a bunch of eggs that are all clones of herself. It's called parthenogenesis. There's a handful of species. There's parthenogenic lizards and roaches, and then there's a parthenogenic crayfish. So it was found, I think, in Germany in like 1990, something like that. It's a new species, which is also kind of cool. It's a brand new species. Somebody had this crayfish in their aquarium, and it's a species that probably comes from like Virginia, Louisiana, the areas in the southeast. Actually, I think Louisiana's better. But there's some sort of mutation. Some individual ended up in the pet trade in Germany. Somebody has one of these guys, and it's like, wait a second, I just have this one female crayfish. Why do I have babies now? And then people started figuring out, oh no, the babies make babies too. And then you get all of a sudden all these crayfish. And now they're all over the United States, they're all over Europe, they're in Madagascar. And it's actually kind of concerning, because they'll displace other species too. They're really good at living in the wild, breeding like crazy, because you only need one of them, and then you have a big population. But I'm really interested in that because I'm interested in behavior, right? And you have to ask the question, if they're all clones of each other, should they act different? Should they behave different? Should they learn different? And I think the answer is still going to be yes, but then the question is like, why? And so I have some biology friends that are doing the same sort of stuff for their physiology. If they're all clones of each other, they should be physiologically identical, but they don't end up identical. And so there's some developmental process that happens, like, from egg to, being a juvenile to being an adult. Something changes. They experience things, it changes their biology. They might experience things and it changes their behavior. So I'm really interested in those. I think it would be really cool to study their behavior, sort of how their life history affects their behavioral strategies, the way they learn. You can even see, sort of their personality or temperament might differ. That would be a really cool species to play with. As a bonus, crayfish and the shrimp that I have are notoriously aggressive. They're mean, and you can't keep them together because they will get each other. They will fight always. And these guys it's an all-female species, and so they're totally fine. They're totally fine to be housed in a colony with all their babies sort of running around. So as a practical bonus, that would be nice too, to have, more than one crayfish per tank. And so for a lot of people, what they're interested in is how do people learn, and how do we help people learn to be better.